Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer on the atmosphere. Today we are laying down the absolute critical groundwork for your DGCA exams, making sure you fundamentally understand the actual environment you'll be flying through. And hey, if you want to master even more aviation topics, definitely make sure to subscribe to the Pilot Arnav YouTube channel. Okay, let's dive right in.
Here is our flight plan for today. We'll start with weather and safety, then move into the composition of the atmosphere, followed by water vapor and ozone. After that, we'll break down the thermal layers, starting with the troposphere, continue our climb from the stratosphere up to the exosphere, and we'll wrap the whole thing up with the International Standard Atmosphere.
All right, Section 1, Weather, Safety, and Aviation.
Before we even take off, we've got to face the primary problem head-on. Let's be real, while we have completely mastered machine engineering, weather remains this massive, totally uncontrollable variable. The quote here perfectly captures the actual stakes of aviation history. You see, mastering meteorology isn't just about passing a CPL or ATPL exam. It is literally about survival. Human factors and weather are the two major elements that lead to incidents in modern aviation. So having a rock-solid knowledge of meteorology, that's what arms you with the insight to make those timely, safe decisions when you're up there in the air.
Just think about it. Any single one of these severe weather phenomena can force a pilot to divert to an alternate aerodrome or, cause a complete stoppage of flight operations altogether. When you encounter severe icing, your aircraft's lift is immediately compromised. When you hit wind shear, your airspeed can drop dangerously close to stall speed in a matter of seconds. It's intense, and this is exactly why we study the atmosphere.
Moving on to Section 2, Composition of the Atmosphere. Let's talk about the homosphere.
So, let's look at the groundwork of what pilots are actually flying through. From the surface up to about 80 kilometers, we have this uniform, homogeneous mixture of gases that we call the homosphere. Nitrogen makes up about 78% of it, and roughly 21% is oxygen. That leaves just about 1% for argon, carbon dioxide, and a few other trace gases. Think of this mixture as a giant protective blanket wrapped around the Earth. But remember, this blanket has weight, it exerts pressure, it's compressible, and it is highly mobile.
Now here is where it gets really interesting. And honestly, you need to watch out for this because it's a massive DGCA exam trap. By volume, the ratio of nitrogen to oxygen is 4:1. But by weight, it's actually 3:1. So what does that tell us? It means oxygen is heavier than nitrogen. Because gravity is busy compressing these heavier gases right near the Earth's surface, a staggering 80% of our entire atmosphere is concentrated in just the first 16 kilometers. This rapid drop in gas density as you climb is the exact reason you absolutely need supplemental oxygen when you're flying above 10,000 feet.
Right. Section 3, Water vapor and ozone. Let's look at greenhouse gases. You might already know this, but our atmosphere is largely heated from below. Greenhouse gases absorb the Earth's long-wave terrestrial radiation, which is what keeps our sea level at a very comfortable, livable 15 degrees Celsius. But let's talk specifically about water vapor. The absolutely crucial point to remember here is that warmer air can hold more water vapor. The air's capacity to hold water is directly proportional to its temperature. This is exactly why the hot tropics can hold up to that 4% maximum by volume, while freezing polar air holds almost zero. When the air is holding all the water it possibly can at a specific temperature, it hits 100% relative humidity, and that's what we call saturated air.
And we can't forget about ozone. Found mostly up in the upper atmosphere, somewhere between 10 and 50 kilometers, its maximum concentration actually sits right around the 20 to 25 kilometer mark. Here's how it works. When ozone molecules absorb shortwave UV radiation from the sun, they get heavy and they sink. This absorption process actually warms up that specific layer of the upper atmosphere, all while protecting life down below from some really nasty stuff, like skin cancer and cataracts. Okay, Section 4, Thermal Layers. We're starting with the troposphere. Let's start our vertical ascent into the troposphere. This layer alone holds roughly 75% of the atmosphere's entire weight, and for us aviators, it's where almost all of our weather and our flying happens. Because the atmosphere is actually a pretty poor conductor of heat, it primarily gets heated by the ground through conduction and convection. So, naturally, as you go higher and move further away from that heat source, the temperature drops. We call this the lapse rate. Now, it's really important to contrast the standard cooling with an inversion. An inversion is a highly stable region where the temperature actually goes up as you gain height. Or you could have an isothermal layer, which is where the temperature remains perfectly constant as you climb.
Make sure you memorize this exact standard tropospheric lapse rate. It's 6.5 degrees Celsius per kilometer, or exactly 1.98 degrees Celsius per 1,000 feet. Seriously, burn this into your memory. This is a highly tested metric for both your CPL and ATPL evaluations. You're going to use this number constantly to calculate things like the freezing level and altitude temperatures.
So as we reach the top of the troposphere, we hit the tropopause, which is where the temperature finally stops dropping. But here's a really fascinating question. Why is the tropopause colder over the equator than it is over the poles? It sounds backward, right? Well, because the equator gets so much more direct solar radiation. The hot air there rises much, much higher. We're talking up to 16 to 18 kilometers. And it undergoes massive expansion cooling that entire way up. Over the poles, though, the air only rises about 8 to 10 kilometers. So by the time the air reaches the top over the equator, it is significantly colder, hitting around minus 75 degrees Celsius. Also, you've got to watch out for abrupt height breaks in the tropopause around the 40 and 60 degree latitudes. That is exactly where powerful, turbulent jet streams love to hide out.
Section 5. Stratosphere to the exosphere. Let's explore those upper layers.
Moving past the tropopause, it is vital to understand what happens to temperatures as we climb into the higher, thinner atmospheric layers. First up, the stratosphere, which extends up to about 50 kilometers. It actually starts out isothermal, but then the temperature increases. Yep, an inversion. And that's due to the ozone absorbing UV heat. Because it's a stable inversion with practically no water vapor, it gives airliners a brilliantly smooth, weather-free ride above 11 kilometers. Next is the mesosphere. Here, temperatures plummet once again, reaching the atmosphere's absolute coldest point of minus 90 degrees Celsius at the mesopause. Finally, we hit the thermosphere. Up here, sparse molecules absorb intense UV radiation, causing temperatures to violently spike. The lower part of this layer is called the ionosphere, and because it's heavily ionized, it acts as a really crucial reflector for our aviation radio communications. Now, even though these upper layers are generally totally free of standard weather and moisture, if you're lucky, you might occasionally spot some incredibly rare and beautiful ice crystal cloud formations. Up in the upper stratosphere during polar winters, you might see nacreous or mother-of-pearl clouds. Higher still, way up in the upper mesosphere, you might catch a glimpse of noctilucent clouds. Knowing exactly where these guys form is actually a frequent trivia point on aviation exams, so keep them in mind.
And that brings us to Section 6, the International Standard Atmosphere, focusing on ISA parameters.
So, because the real atmosphere is just a chaotic mess, it's wildly variable and constantly changing depending on where you are, the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, had to step in and create a standardized baseline. Knowing these baseline ISA parameters is basically your ultimate exam cheat sheet, and it is absolutely mandatory for calculating aircraft performance. For ISA, you always assume the air state is dry. Mean sea level temperature is exactly 15 degrees Celsius. Mean sea level pressure is 1013.25 hectopascals, which by the way is identical to 29.92 inches of mercury. MSL density is set at 1225 grams per cubic meter, and that standard lapse rate we talked about? It holds steady until 11 kilometers, at which point the temperature levels out at a chilly minus 56.5 degrees Celsius.
Of course, we all know the real world rarely matches the textbook perfectly, and that is where ISA deviation comes in. It's pretty simple. It's just the actual atmospheric temperature minus the ISA standard temperature for your specific altitude. You can easily calculate the expected ISA temperature at your altitude by subtracting roughly 2 degrees Celsius for every 1,000 feet you climb, starting from that 15 degrees sea level baseline. So let's say you're at 1,000 feet. Standard ISA would be 13 degrees. But if the actual outside air temperature is reading 11 degrees, your ISA deviation is minus 2. That means it is 2 degrees colder than standard. Which brings us to the ultimate question to wrap things up. If the actual air density and temperature deviate drastically from ISA standards, how will that alter your aircraft's lift and thrust on your next takeoff? I'm going to leave you with that thought because mastering these meteorological facts isn't just about ticking boxes to pass a written test. It's about fundamentally understanding the very physics that are keeping you safely in the sky. When the temperature spikes, your density drops, and your engine performance deteriorates right along with it. Truly understanding the atmosphere is what separates a passenger from a professional aviator. Once again, please don't forget to subscribe to Pilot Arnav on YouTube for more educational deep dives just like this one. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and safe flying out there.